Sarah, let's kick off with you first. We're going to start by talking a bit about the recent survey that you've done with Philanthropy Australia with your funder members. It's going to be one of those days. Your funder members being those who make funding distributions and grants. In April, you issued a survey to see how COVID-19 was impacting their grant making decisions and thinking. The link of this survey has been shared in your chat box at the moment, so you can go in and delve into this research. It's fabulous. You received 101 responses, so a really good indication of what's going on in your community. Alongside this, you've spoken with numerous, I can't probably imagine how many funders you've spoken to over the last few months. Just looking at the bigger picture to begin with, what has stood out most to you?
Thanks, Julia. Look, I mean, I think in a really simple way, the response from Australian philanthropy at this time, first to the bushfires and then immediately with the COVID-19 health and economic crisis, has been nothing short of inspirational. I think Australian philanthropy's response over the last 3, 4, 5 months has just been extraordinary. And it's interesting, so we've been reflecting after the GFC in sort of 2008, there actually was quite a lot of chatter and criticism of philanthropy, that perhaps it was a bit missing in action. And I was working for a foundation at the time, so I actually remember this. The foundations felt that they'd been hit, their corpus had been hit, they sort of retreated. They certainly weren't active in the advocacy and the discussion around the impact on community and community organisations. Now, I think it's the polar opposite. I think philanthropy has responded incredibly, strategically, generously, bravely. I think it's extraordinary. We'll have a look at some of that data. Yeah. If there is one little shadow side, it's that we have to remember that the philanthropic dollar as a proportion of the total dollar in the social change space is still pippy. So, whilst I think philanthropy has been extraordinary, we need more of it.
Yes. Yeah. More and better. Hey, Sarah?
Please.
So delving into the survey, and I guess to that point around sort of inspirational and seeing, action happen very quickly, 88% of funders said that they had changed or adapted their granting and operating approaches in response to COVID-19. Can you please share with us what type of changes they have or the changes that are being implemented?
Yeah, certainly. So this was within 6 weeks of COVID-19 hitting. 88% of the funders responding to this survey had already changed their grant making practices. And so do we have that slide, Julia, to share?
Sure do.
So I'll just run you through the highlights. So down one, please. Number 4, that's it, that one. So you can see on this slide, the big green box, what most people had done was increase their flexibility. So, changing timelines, taking away some of the hoops that you have to jump through, perhaps, changing reporting requirements, basically being much more flexible with their grant partners and, taking off, relinquishing any of those sorts of obligations. That was 72% of them. The second most common response was that third sort of yellowy block. And this was 48% of our funders had basically shifted their funding to unrestricted grants, which is extraordinary. I just think that is fantastic. The third most common response was actually that 42% of them had increased the amount of grant funds available. So, that's half, if you like, of the respondents, over half with the flexibility, half of them then saying, okay, we're actually going to move to unrestricted grants, we'll take the ties off it, and then nearly half of them putting more money out there. So I mean, that as a majority response in 6 weeks I think is freaking stunning.
Yeah.
Many of them have brought forward grant payments, 27% of them, so bringing forward distributions that they had planned for later in the year. Offering financial support, 26% of them. 36% of them had suspended their kind of regular program in order to respond specifically to COVID-19 needs.
Yes.
And 32% of them had established new kind of COVID-19 grant programs.
Wow. It's extraordinary to see the breadth of the activity, isn't it, as well? Wow.
Brilliant.
Absolutely. I'm just going to stop that share there. Another part of the survey was that stood out was that 60% of those that responded were now offering grants to new grant partners. And this is interesting because this two-part series has come off the back of a broad range of questions that we've had so far with Reset 2020. And a lot of people feeling very paralysed and frozen around, you know, meeting with new funders and contacting new funders. So to see that 60% have actually working with new grant partners is really encouraging. So it does speak a lot to that topic of, you know, we're not sure whether to contact funders at this time. Can you give us a couple of examples of what you've seen in this area?
Yeah, and look, this was an important question because anecdotally, prior to running the survey, what we had heard from funders is they were doubling down with their existing relationships. And so a lot of the opening up and the generosity was going to their existing partners. And that is absolutely true. So it was really terrific to see that 60% of them were opening up to new partners. So within that 60%, the most common areas were outside of their regular program focus, so focused on COVID-19 needs, immediate relief, food security, response and recovery, still maintaining their bushfire commitments, and also a big increase in kind of collective funding. And maybe Catherine might talk about what the Lord Mayor's has done, because I think there's been an extraordinary collaborative effort to sort of, you know, design once, use many times. In people collaborating. Some interesting examples. So we have some funders who are proactively going out and reaching out to communities that they think are perhaps most forgotten to say, we're here to give you some money. We had one funder, for example, opened up a grants program and said it's non-competitive, everybody will get something. I mean, they may all not get a lot, but everybody will get something. We've had other funders who, because of their tax status, were really keen to support those communities and organisations that didn't have DGR status or may not have been registered with the ACNC. Again, going to a part of the community that doesn't generally get supported. So again, a really smart, generous response.
Yeah, wow. Brilliant to see 60%.
Yeah.
It was quite a surprising and refreshing number to see when the research first came out, for sure. Moving on into the next part that you asked in the survey was around advocacy, and just want to delve into that a little bit. 40% of those that participated said they were now engaging in advocacy on behalf of particular groups as part of their COVID-19 response. Can you give us some examples of what you have seen in this area as well?
Yeah, and look, this wasn't necessarily a surprise in that over the last couple of years, we have seen many more philanthropists be strategic and smart and step into advocacy as part of their toolkit, whether that's funding their partners to build their advocacy capacity, whether that's funding particular campaigns or advocacy programs, or whether that's being advocates themselves, or sort of all of the above. So this wasn't a surprise because we've seen, you know, this really grow in Australia, which is, I think, fantastic. The most obvious area where our members have been active in advocacy is around the kind of job seeker new start messaging. So many of our members were involved in the Raise the Rate campaign, both funding the campaign, working with ACOS, working with other partners, doing the research, promoting and socialising those messages. And so flipping that now into what have we learned with JobSeeker and how do we maintain that kind of level? So lots of our members continuing to fund that. Many of them have funded their partner organisations to advocate for their needs right now, depending on COVID-19. And many of our members who were deeply committed to partnering with communities through the bushfires have actually increased and maintained or increased their advocacy for those organisations as well.
Excellent. Some amazing examples there. Thank you. And finally, Sarah, I've got a final question for you before we jump across and have a chat with Jody and see what she's been seeing. And we'll delve into this a little bit more with Jody as well. In the research, 83% said that the value of their corpus had declined as a result, obviously, of economic instability. 50% said that they will still maintain or increase their giving, and 32% will lower their distribution levels. Again, if this is something you want to delve into a little bit more, the links are in the chat box here as well, so you can look at the full survey results. Sarah, those results were from April and analysed in May. Things move quickly in the world today. How is that comparing to what you're seeing now, and maybe what we might expect to be seeing into this next financial year?
Well, I think what we're hearing is that from Structured Philanthropy, distribution rates for the financial year that's going to end on whatever it is, Tuesday, probably won't be that effective because the markets have bounced around. And certainly in terms of our survey, when we said, look, what do you think your distribution levels are going to be to the end of this financial year? 38% of them said they were going to increase over last year. So what that means is there'll be a significant proportion, I think, tapping into capital as well. Now, remember that not all trusts and foundations can do that. You know, the trustee defines how money can be managed and used, and some can grant capital and some can't, and some have certain formula and some have others. So there isn't a blanket response to this. I think what most people are really nervous of is the next 2 financial years. So the one starting on Wednesday and then the one thereafter. And that's why most of our advocacy work at this time has been with trying to encourage the government to create more incentives for people to give. So the incentive for ancillary funds to distribute more than their minimum with future credits, which is a policy initiative that we have got up, which is terrific. But we're also pushing for concessional loan programs for registered charities and 150% tax incentive deduction for giving to Item 1 DGRs. So I think we're going to see it all over the place. But what I thought was interesting from the survey is that most of the people who said that their giving would probably decline were anticipating market declines and can't dip into corpus.
Yes.
Everybody else was either saying it's too soon to tell, or we really want to maintain, if not increase, giving. So again, I think that is hugely encouraging.
Absolutely, absolutely, and well done, and congratulations to you and your team on getting some of those policy movements through as quickly as they came through as well. That was fantastic to see.